Bill McFarland, 4083, asked, how about bending a pipe? And I thought, this is great. This will be a straightforward video. I know exactly how I'm going to do this, until I actually tried to do it. I discovered something really interesting about Revolve Sketch. It could be a bug. It could be something easily fixed, but this is how I would do it currently, right now, and why you might want to do it too. Okay, first, let me show you what I'm talking about. This is how I envisioned I would make this work in terms of taking a pipe and bending it. I would just start off with a straight pipe. So again, there's a number of ways you can create this, but I'm using Extrude Sketch here, and I'm just going to create a nice circle, and there's a couple of ways you can do this. I've actually made here a square, but if I double click on this, it will reveal the points that made up my shape originally, or I can just simply click on the icon on the left-hand side called Edit and Modify Selected Shape, or A on your keyboard. And then just double click again. You can see that it turns them all into smooth corners, and I have myself a circle. However, our friendly neighborhood Tinkercad engineer Marco suggested a different way of doing this. And it works just as well. Just go into Create Smooth Curve and just lay out your square like so. And as you do that, it will just naturally convert those into smooth corners, and there it is again. Great tips. You pick whatever works for you. Anyways, here is my cylinder, but to make it a tube, I'll just click on Stroke Settings and then just turn this on here. The stroke path, I would turn that on, and I could determine the actual width of that stroke path, make it 2 millimeters by default. So let's keep it as 2 millimeters, and let's finish the sketch. And there's my tube, pretty straightforward. Now, the nice thing here is that I can re-enter this sketch, and I can select and copy that sketch. Control C or this icon up here in the upper left. And then I can exit out of this sketch, and let's throw down a Revolve sketch next. Now this is what I'm going to use to make my corners or my bends in my pipe. And here all I would do is just paste. Now this is where it gets interesting, because this is not the same shape that I had back in that previous sketch. So I thought, well, maybe it's just this setting over here, the stroke settings. Maybe I just need to ensure that it is set, and it is already turned on. Stroke path is turned on, and yet sliding around, adjusting the width of this path does not make any difference whatsoever. This is just a solid circle here that's being spun around this central axis. So when I exit out of this, here it is there. In fact, I can show you if I do my sweep setting and just pull this back, you can see that that is a solid cylinder there, or a solid ring. I don't know what's going on here. This might actually be something that's supposed to happen. It might be a bit of a glitch that Tinkercad will fix at any point now. I don't know. But in any case, I had to come up with a different way of creating these elbows or bends in my pipe. And in fact, the way I'm about to show you is probably the better way of doing this, especially if you're going to create unique shapes with your pipe, such as junctions. More on that later. Let's start with Revolve Sketch. And what we're going to do is we're going to throw this down. And here, I'm going to create that tube again. I'm just going to go with a 10 millimeter by 10 millimeter box. And just like I showed you before, I'm just going to select this so I get those points. And then I can just go ahead and just double click this. Again, a number of different ways I can create my circle, but there is my tube like that. Perfect. Finish the sketch. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a second Revolve sketch. This one I am going to make sure it is centered to my first sketch. And I'm going to center them or align them along the center points there. So I'm going to select both and call this alignment tool up, or L. I'm going to select the ring shape that is already in place just to keep it in place. And I'm just going to click this center button here just to make sure that this Revolve sketch I've just thrown down here is now aligned to the center of that. Now that's important because what I'm going to do is when I open this up, I want to ensure that whatever I am revolving around my center axis, I want to make sure that this center axis is in line with the other center axis of this shape I see in the background. Because what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a slightly smaller circle here that I will then convert and make into another tube, like so. Now, just so you know, let me just back out of this. You might find that the snap grid that you have set is too restrictive. And so for me, this actually ended up working fine where I had the dimensions there to create this 8mm by 8mm by 8mm box. But if you wanted something slightly larger or something slightly smaller, and the snap settings on the side here weren't allowing you to do that, you may actually have to go here and just toggle to a lower setting. So you have a finer degree of control there in terms of where you're going to place your points. But for me, this one actually worked out great. So I'm now going to select this, toggle that edit modify selected shape, and I'm just going to double click. That is my shape. Let's back out of this. Now this is going to be my hole or cutout. So when I merge these two objects together or these two rings together, this is going to essentially form the bends or the curves in my pipe pieces. So let's just take both of these and let's just align them so that they are aligned along all the axes, the X, the Y, as well as the Z axis. And that hole is placed in there, but again, I don't need all of this. I just want a portion of this because I'm going to make my corners. No problem. Just select this outer shape here, the solid, and play around with the sweep. As I do this, you can see I start peeling back that solid shape, revealing any corner piece I want. And I can select a specific degree. If I want to go 90 degrees or 180 degrees, I can just type that in. Or I can use this slider to set whatever angle I want. 60 degrees, whatever you want, you can create the bend for that. Now, actually, what I would recommend that you would do is make a copy of this or duplicate this, Control D. And I just like to set this off to the side because if I'm going to be making a number of these corner pieces or bends for my pipe, I'm probably going to be coming back to this many times over. So I like to keep one off to the side. Now that I have this, I can just merge this all together. Control G or union group. And there is my fantastic looking corner piece. It's actually just a little bit below our work plane. So let me just press D to drop it onto the work plane like that. It is now time to make our straight pieces of pipe. For that, I'm going to go to Extrude Sketch. Just drop this over here like this. Again, this is really easy for me to recreate because I remembered the dimensions of my first pipe, and I'm going to actually construct this the exact same way I did before. I'm going to make my solid cylinder first, and that was a 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter square. And I'm going to double click on that to get all those points showing, and then double click on it again. So I get my nice looking cylinder like this, finish the sketch. And I know I probably could have done this where I could have gone to my stroke settings and then made this into a cylinder that way, but there is a benefit for doing it the way I'm about to show you here. So I'm going to do this and construct this the same way I did with my bent pieces of pipe here. I'm going to throw down another extrude sketch and just make sure that it is aligned. And I'm going to align them along their midpoints here. And let's just open this up. And using the same dimensions that we used before, I'm going to create a smaller square here, an 8mm by 8mm by 8mm square. And double click on this and repeat the same steps. There is my beautiful looking circle. Finish the sketch. Maybe I need to move this out of the way. Hang on. There we go. And make that a hole. Align these two pieces together again. And there is my tube. Fantastic. Now, I can group this as well, but I might make a duplicate because I might need more of this in a bit. All right. Control G or union group. And there it is. And the beautiful thing is I can make this any length I want. It works. All right. Let's put this together. So for this, for me, what I tend to do is I just use the alignment tool once I get this in the proper orientation, and just make sure that these are aligned along the X, Y, and Z axis. So I'm going to select both, press L or align, and I'm going to select where this corner piece is because that's already resting on our work plane. That's perfect. And I'm just going to align it down along there. And I'm going to align it actually to the outer edge here because that way I know that these two pieces are going to be lined up perfectly. If I align it to the center, you can see that it's going to put this pipe to the center of that corner piece, and that's not going to align at all. Now, just to ensure that I can push this piece right up so it's sitting flush up against the opening there of my corner piece, I just use this, the work plane tool, drag this out, and just make sure that it is placed somewhere along that front facing surface. And I just select this now because it is aligned up perfectly in the other two axes. All I got to do now is just press D to drop to that work plane. Done. I can continue making duplicates of my corner piece and basically continue creating any curve that I would like. Once I have this set up here, I can double click on this just to temporarily ungroup it, select my solid piece there, and play around with the sweep. How much of that corner do I want? Maybe it is just a 180, something like this. And while I'm at it, I can just swing this around using my start so that I have the ability to do something like that. And now I can align these pieces like so. You get the idea. It's really quite endless what you can do with this and continue making those pieces. So for me, all this is really just going back and forth between duplicating these different pieces, adjusting them, rotating them, and then using the alignment tool by aligning these pieces together. And the final piece, just to making sure that they are sitting flush to each other, is using the work plane tool and then dropping that object to that work plane. And of course, once you're done with your work plane, just select that tool once again and just make sure it's placed anywhere else on that work plane outside of those objects, and it'll go back to the way it was before. Well, that's it. Now this is great when you're dealing with turns that are 90 degrees, 180. Those are pretty easy to do because it's quite easy to rotate these pieces, lining them up using the alignment tool. But you might actually have a need for an angle and the ability to connect tubes that are outside of your simple 90 degrees or 180 degrees. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So I'm going to duplicate this corner piece up here again. Drag one more out like this. And I'm just going to select this solid piece here. Let's make this something that is, you know what, let's make it 65 degrees. Perfect, 65 degrees. And we're going to union group this like so. And let's move this somewhere down here on our work plane. Something like that, and let's drop it onto that work plane. Perfect. Now, if we were to add pipes to this, so let's grab this pipe here, let's make a duplicate of this. This would be really easy for this part here because this is basically a 90-degree turn of this pipe. And that's just a matter of lining them up, selecting them both, alignment tool, align it to this corner piece here. I'm going to align it to this back edge there because that way I know that the two openings are going to be lined up perfectly. So something like that. And then, as I said before, using something like the work plane tool, putting it on that flat surface there of that opening of the pipe, then selecting this, and then just dropping it, or D, to that work plane. Select the work plane tool again, and just click somewhere else on our work plane there, and that gets rid of it. Perfect. That was easy. But what about this one here? How are you going to connect the pipe so it's sitting flush up against this? So there's a couple ways you can do this. Let's make a copy of this pipe again. So a duplicate, Control D, and I drag this out here like this. Now, in order to make these two pieces sit flush to each other, I'm going to need to use the work plane tool. And again, just make sure that it is placed on that front-facing surface there where I'd want to have my tube sit flush to. And once I've got this done here, pressing drop is not going to help me here, because if I do that, it's just simply going to drop it like that, and it's not going to align it up. What I really want to do is use the cruise tool. So I'm going to select that tube like so, and I'm going to use my cruise tool. Now I'm going to take this white grab point there, and as soon as I start moving it anywhere on that work plane, it's going to snap to that. And I know that that is now matched up perfectly to my pipe there. At least the surfaces of them are. They still need to be aligned. And that's where being in the work plane tool mode here is going to be a huge help, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that corner piece and this straight piece of pipe, and I'm going to press align. Now, you can see what I've done here. This is going to allow me to align it along these axes, and I would align it very much the same way that I would do. I'm going to select this corner piece, and I want to make sure that it is aligned like that, along that axis, and along this outer axis here. And when I do that, that is now perfectly lined up, and it is now sitting flush because, again, I made sure that I used the cruise tool to set it up against my work plane tool here. Everything is lined up. Press this, the work plane tool, and press anywhere outside, and I'm back to my regular work plane, and I know that these two pieces are lined up with a 60-degree bend. Looks great. Remember at the start of this video, I said that there would be an advantage of creating your tubes in this way, where it was basically the use of two revolve sketches. One sketch would be the solid piece, the cylinder piece, and the second sketch would be the hole or cutout that would hollow out this pipe. Having it like this makes it so much easier if you ever want to combine these pipes and create these connector points or junctions. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So let's just take this, flip it on its edge like that. If I can just select both of them, I can make this any length I want, like that. And it becomes really handy if I take a duplicate of this, Control D. And let's say I just want to flip it like this. And let's just nudge this downward like this. Now here I can use the ruler. I can just eyeball this. For me, I'm just going to select both of these pieces, the solid cylinder as well as the cutout. And I'm just going to nudge them using my arrow keys into here. And I'm just going to just bring it so it's halfway into that pipe that it's crossing into. Now, because I have these holes in place, if I just take this and I basically group it or Control G, I've created this beautiful looking junction there, like a T junction. And let me just make this transparent, zoom in on it like this. You can see what I have there. But yeah, after this, you can basically use the same steps and create any kind of junction. I could create a Y junction and just angle these pieces. So just one last thing here. I can continue to add more sketches to my pipes to create unique features like connections. I could just drag out this here, and again, I'd have to make sure I centered it. So let's just back out of this. Let's do this, select both, and let's just make sure we keep that pipe there stationary. Let's just move this and center our new sketch to that. And let's open up the sketch. And I'm just going to move to the top of this here like that. And what I want to do is I want to create a bit of a sleeve that will serve as a connector for this pipe to connect to other pipes. And I'm actually going to play around with the settings here. I'm going to make this 0.1 on my snapping grid setting because I want to have a lot of control over where these points are going to go. So I like to give a tolerance of about 0.4 millimeters. So if I have a pipe that is 12 millimeters in diameter, I need to give it a hole or a sleeve that is 12.4 millimeters in diameter, because the filament, as it's being printed, will swell. And that 0.4 millimeters should give me a nice tight fit without the need to sand things down because the fit is just too tight. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to 0.3 there. So let's go 0.4, 0.5. So technically speaking, that's 0.2 millimeters on this side, but also 0.2 millimeters on the other side. So that should be good. Now, in terms of the actual length here, it's really up to me how much I want to have this sleeve come out. Let's just go to that. And I can use these measurements here. Let's make this a 2 millimeter wide piece. And do the same thing here. Like that. And then we'll just give it like a nice angled approach back into our pipe. And then I'm just going to connect it like that. Now, let's take a look. So again, there it is there. I just have to make sure that I align it now with the tube because it is sitting outside that tube like that. So I'm going to select all of those pieces, hit the alignment tool or L, then select my original pipe there so it stays in place. And I'm just going to make sure it's centered along the Y and the X axis, and it already is. So that's it. That is my pipe with the connector on there. It's really amazing just being able to add these little features, add connectors, and the design is really up to you, but there it is. I spent a lot of time with pipes today, and I hope this gives you some information if you were looking for more info on pipes in Tinkercad. So until next time, take care, and we will catch you on the next video. Wait, I forgot. One last quick update. I promise this is going to be short, but this is from an earlier video that I did about Scribble and Grampus 360. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, but he was wondering if I actually printed up that one piece where I was using the Scribble to create almost like a vase. And I didn't, but I thought, let's just print it up now because I still have the file on Tinkercad, and here it is. No supports. I really like the look of this. I liked it when I saw it in Tinkercad. I definitely like seeing it now in its physical form. I think it looks fantastic. So anyway, you were wondering, there it is. Again, I'm not sure what I would do with this, but if I were to make pencil holder, vase, whatever, you got options. And there it is. All right. That's everything I had to say. Okay, everybody. Until next time, take care, and we'll see you on the next video.